and welcome to the Lollygaggers Dynasty Recap. This is episode 1 of season 1 for the Lollygaggers Dynasty League. So we'll start off with our matchup minute, and that's where we'll just go over the matchups from this past week. This was week 1, again, for the first season of our league. Starting it off, we had JMC, who defeated Al Martinet 304 to 265. Next, Serial Chillers took down Flaming Prius. That was with a score of 282 to 204. Following that up, we have Oki Sooner, who took down Hideki. That was a score of 275 to 245. Ace defeated In 10, breaking the Ace curse with a score of 318 to 143. Bose, the favored champion coming in this year, defeated Big Peach with a score of 380 to 227. And finally, Zhang, that's me. I took down Mike with a score of 305 to 243. Our high scorer for the week was Bose with that 318-point score. Our lowest scorer, we had In 10 with just 143. The biggest blowout did come from that lower matchup with Ace taking down In 10 by 175, pardon me. And the closest matchup was that first one I mentioned. It was JMC with just 29 points over Al Martinet. Next, we're going to move on to the Best Bats segment, where we'll take a look at 5 hitters from the week who really excelled or helped carry their team to victory, or maybe made the margin of loss just a little bit closer. We'll start off with a pretty obvious one. It's the big man, Aaron Judge. All rise. He had a quiet opening day, just about 1.9 points, but on that second game on Friday, they kind of teed off against Nestor Cortez. He hit 3 home runs and racked up 34.9 points. Yes, that's 34.9 points. Starting pitcher numbers from a batter. He's broken in fantasy. And just to top it off, he scored another 15.1 the next day. That ended up with a total of 52.7 points for JMC. A big boost in his win over Al Martinet. Next, we'll have one of Bo's batters. We'll have a couple of his guys appearing on this list. We have Jordan Westberg, who had a bit of an up and down matchup. He started off with an 11.2, then moved to minus 0.1 before rounding it out with 18.2 because he had a rest day on Sunday. Didn't play on that last day. Even only playing 3 games and only scoring points in 2 of them, he still scored 29.3 points on the over the matchup. That was on 6 hits, 3 of them home runs, and 3 RBIs against the Blue Jays. So Westberg definitely a big contributor for Bose. Another one of Bo's batters is coming up next, and that's, of course, you all know him, Shohei Ohtani. This is a little bit of a tricky one because it fell within the Tokyo series, so he played 5 games rather than just 3 games or 4 games from some others. I did choose to include him because his numbers are really consistently good. He opened up with 5.1 before following up with 2 performances of 10.1. He had a 2.1 and then a 4.2 to close it out this Sunday. That totaled him up to 31.6 points, 6 hits, 2 home runs, 2 RBIs, split against the Cubs and the Tigers. The next one was a bit of a surprise, I have to admit. Oki Sooner had Eugenio Suarez, who started off with a solid performance of 6 points before going absolutely ballistic in games 2 and 3, 18.9 in game 2, and 10.5 in game 3, before having a little bit of a minus with a minus 1.2, 1 strikeout on that final game. That all came with 4 hits, all of them for homers, and a total of 7 RBI. And finally, we'll close out with one I unfortunately got to see firsthand. That's Adolis Garcia, who plays for Serial Chillers. He diced the Red Sox up. He didn't score any points on that first game, but came in the second game with a 3.1 before his big swings in game 2, 17.2 points, followed up by 8.3. That was 2 doubles, 2 home runs, and 4 RBI. Big performance from Adolis. Next, we're going to move on to potent pitchers for the week. This is a look at just some of the starting pitchers that had some of the biggest performances for their teams. Again, I did leave out Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Shota Imanaga. They both pitched in the Tokyo series, and then also when the American season started. The reason I didn't include them is neither one of their performances were super outstanding. So they each had about 40 points for the matchup, but we have some other guys that are nearing 40 points, just pitching one start. So I did choose to highlight them over those other guys. The first one we'll start off with is not one I saw coming. That is Mackenzie Gore, again for Bose, and we're wondering why he's favored, right? Mackenzie Gore threw 13 strikeouts and tallied 40.2 points for Bose on opening day. Really set him up nicely to start the week off. The next one, old friend of ours in Beantown, Nicky Smooches, Nick Pavetta, came in at the last minute. I actually had to change up my sheet. I had somebody else on here, but then he came in with 7 innings of shutout ball. Just 4 Ks though, so really kind of pitching to contact there. But all of that got him 38.4 points. A really solid performance by Nick Pivetta in his first outing for the Padres. Jose Soriano was actually a last-minute waiver wire pickup by Zhang, and he threw 7 innings and scored 36.4 points for me, which were definitely helpful coming down the stretch there as a starter. Jeffrey Springs, who surprisingly was traded to the Athletics from the Rays, he posted 6 innings, 9 Ks that gave, you guessed it, Bose, another top pitcher. That was a 36.2 point for performance. Really, really good outing in his first time in the green and gold for Jeffrey Springs. And then finally, we'll round out those potent pitchers with Seattle Mariners ace Logan Gilbert. Hideki has him. He threw 7 innings pitched, just 1 earned run, and 8 Ks. And that all netted Logan Gilbert 35.4 points. Really, really solid outing. Now, this next segment I am calling Bench Blunders. Big part of this game, as we all know, is benching starters and or benching hitters and setting them and starting them. So from time to time, we'll all bench those players that come out and have a big game. So this will be a chance to just kind of highlight a few of those. Our first one, actually most of these, now that I'm looking at it, come on opening day. We're going to start with Kyle Manzardo. 19.8 points on opening day. It probably would have landed him on the best bats list if he had not been on Serial Chiller's bench. He hit 4 RBI and he hit a homer, a triple, a double. So he was only a base hit away from the cycle. So a little silver lining there for Serial Chillers is if he had hit that single, he would have gotten another 3 points. We would have been looking at, a 25, close to 30-point performance. So maybe it's for the best that he didn't do that. And to add a little insult to injury, unfortunately, he was on the bench again for another 9.2 on Sunday. Maybe worth considering starting him next week. Coming up next, we have Thick Willier Abreu. Now, he was viewed as a trade piece by Boston for a lot of the offseason, with all the top prospects and everything, but he kind of shut that talk up. He had a 4 RBI game with 2 homers, carried the Sox to their win on opening day. Racked up 22 points in the process, all while sitting on Inten's bench. On the bright side, he was started the next 3 days wisely by my fellow Boston fan. He was started the next 3 days, and he put up good numbers throughout the rest of the series. He hit 4.9, 4.0, and then 9.7 to round out the series against Texas. Total of 40.6 points on the matchup. If he had not been sat on that first day, probably would have shown up in the best bats segment. So good start from Willier Abreu. Next, we're coming in with one of Hideki's outfielders, Cedric Mullins. On Thursday, on opening day, he had 19.7 points in that rout of the Blue Jays. He was started the rest of the week by Hideki, but unfortunately did not follow up in his performance from opening night. He had minus 1.4 the following day, 0.1 on the last day. He did get 3.8 in the middle, though, so that's some solid points from your center fielder. And finally, Tyler O'Neill. Now this one, I'm gonna take a little extra in for Okie Sooner because Mr. O'Neill has hit a home run in 5 opening days coming into this week, and now 6 opening days. He had 17 points on the day, again in that rout of the Blue Jays that I mentioned. I mean, come on, 5 opening days with a home run. He's got to be an automatic start. Hopefully next year, if you're still holding on to him, you'll remember to put him in the lineup during that time. Next, we're going to move on to our transaction tracker. So we won't go over too many ads and drops. The plan was to do that, but you sickos racked up 5 pages worth of ads and drops in like a week. So we'll mostly just go over trades. If there are any really key, ads or drops or anything, we'll talk those over as well. Our first trade came, actually all of these trades came pre-season. Okie Sooner sent Trevor McGill, Jordan Romano, and Drake Baldwin over to Big Peach for Carlos Esteves, Jesus Luzardo, and Shane McClanahan. And I have to say, when I first saw this trade, I thought, oh my God, what a steal by Okie Sooner. Swiping 2 starting pitchers and a solid back-end relief arm in Carlos Esteves. I do have good feelings about Drake Baldwin. I think he's going to be a solid catcher for the Braves, especially with that kind of lead up. He has plenty of playing time while Sean Murphy's hurt. And then Shane McClanahan messed up his arm again, and this trade is looking a little more balanced. Still leaning a little bit more right now, at least, towards Okie being the winner of this trade. Drake Baldwin had a bit of a rough start, and Jesus Luzardo had a great start against, I can't remember who the Phillies played, my apologies, but he had a great first start, Luzardo did. Next were a couple trades from me. I drafted Christian Campbell in the draft, and surprisingly, he actually made the opening day roster. So I had to clear out a little bit of space to open up a minor league spot, or to open up a spot on my roster, rather. I traded Luis Angel Acuna to Serial Chiller for Noel V. Marte. Marte has minor league eligibility, so I could just switch him and Campbell out. I do feel like I'm the loser of this trade, just at raw value. I think Acuna's got some pretty solid potential, but, and I even said that when I texted Serial Chillers, but really the way I was seeing myself as getting something out of it is, being able to put Christian Campbell on my roster, so that was helpful. And then to open that second base position, I traded Brandon Lau over to Flaming Prius to his native Tampa for Michael Wacha, so a little bit of reinforcement on the starting pitching front, and we have not seen Wacha pitch yet, so it's hard to say how that's going. Brandon Lau, in his first 3 appearances, actually did pretty solid. He had an 8.1, a 2.6, and a 1.1, so putting up those pretty good numbers, especially for a second baseman, which he continues to do. Next, we are going to slide over to JMC, bringing in the young Jason Dominguez in exchange for Freddie Peralta. Definitely the highest profile trade we're looking at in these first few transactions. Peralta pitched, obviously, against the Yankees. And if any of you saw those performances, most of them were not terribly good, although he did rack up a relatively solid 15 points. That was a good start. And then Jason Dominguez, he, in his few Yankees appearances, he played in 3 of their games. He got 0 points on one day, 3.1 on the next, and then 0.2 in the following one, although he certainly projects to be a strong bat in that lineup this season and probably contend for the AL Rookie of the Year. Finally, we are going to dive into next week's notes. So this will just be a chance to check out what's going on next week, see some of the projections for our matchups, and then we'll of course check back in with those at the end of next week to start next week's episode. So we'll start off with Ace versus Big Peach. Ace versus Big Peach. The projections have Peach with about a 63% chance of winning, taking down Ace 534 to 466. Ace is looking to improve to 2-0 here, while Peach is looking to get back to 500 at 1-1. We've got a few of these matchups. I find these pretty interesting, where we got 1-0 and 1-0-1. A lot of stakes on the line, even early in the season. Al Martinet versus Mike is our next matchup. 77% chance in favor of Al Martinet. 504 to 374. That's one of the biggest margins we're looking at. Again, in terms of projections, these are projections. No one's perfect, but that is what they're showing. Both of these guys are looking for their first win of the season. So at least one of them is coming out of there at 1-1, but the other will for sure be at 0-2. So that'll be an interesting matchup to keep an eye on. Bose versus Hideki is our next one. That's a big-time heavyweight matchup. It's listed pretty close, projected with Hideki having about a 59% chance of defeating Bose. The score they're projecting for that is 513 to 470. If that does happen, that would leave both teams with a 1-1 record. Next is Zhang versus Oki. Both of us are looking for a second win. Oki Sooner is pretty heavily favored here with a 66% chance of taking me down in week 2. The score is projected right now at 447 to 404. Flaming Prius versus JMC is next. JMC is projected to have a 61% chance to win over Prius with about a 40-point margin at 470 to 421. I'm so sorry, that's a 50-point margin. There's my math. It's about a 50-point margin at 470 to 421. This result would have JMC go undefeated. Prius is still looking for his first win in week 3. We'll see if that does happen. And our final matchup for the week is Serial Chiller versus In10. This is a really closely projected one. The highest projected number for a team to score next week is 505. That's what they have Serial Chiller scoring, beating In10 at 497. It's another matchup where both of those teams, we've one team entering 1-0, one team entering 0-1. So definitely an interesting one to keep an eye on. With that is going to close out our first Lollygaggers Dynasty Recap. I'm your host, Ari, a.k.a. Zhang, and I will see you at this time next week.
Do you know what that makes you, Larry?
Lollygaggers.
Lollygaggers.